And joining us now to talk weather here as we get past the 4th of July holiday, we welcome in our good friend Eric Snodgrass with Nutrien. Eric, great to have you back on the show, sir. I hope you had a good holiday weekend.
You know, it wasn't too bad, although I'm in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, so we had rain for a lot of the 4th of July. Barely got a parade in, and then after that, all the rain canceled the fireworks. But there's something kind of neat about today. It's the 5th of July. And that has to do with Earth's orbit around the sun. It turns out today is the day of the year where the Earth is farthest from the sun. But the reason why it's summer here in the Northern Hemisphere is because we're tilted toward the sun. So more direct sunlight, long days, more intense heat. And that heat's helping to pop some of these bigger storms. But there's your science lesson for the day.
Well, I appreciate the science lesson. Always giving us those science and meteorological facts, and we appreciate it, Eric. And speaking of the weather, and you mentioned some of the storms, and then we got some heat in some areas. What are you seeing with that weather forecast here as we shift into the month of July? What are we seeing this week, Eric?
Yeah, well, for a lot of folks, especially throughout the Corn Belt, this shift into July has been really favorable. Here's what's happened. We had a deep trough of low pressure all of June just off the northwest coast of the United States, and that put a ridge in the midsection of the country. Saw a lot of regional drought development. Western Corn Belt, Eastern Corn Belt, Mid-South all got very hot and very dry at times. Well, what's going on now is that the pattern is slowly shifting. We're developing a deeper Hudson Bay low. That takes the big ridge that today is over the Mid-South. That's the one that's prompting over 20 states centered on the Mississippi River to have heat advisories and excessive heat warnings. Well, that ridge is going to move all week long toward the southern plains and eventually over the Great Basin. So you're going to hear people like me, meteorologists, using the term ridge riders or ring of fire configuration on the thunderstorm pattern. And all we're talking about here is storms that run the periphery of that ridge. So think Montana all the way to North Carolina. That whole strip, the first 3 to 4 days of this week, is just going to see repeated chances of storms. And we need every ounce of moisture out of those storms we can get through that area, especially the Eastern Corn Belt, parts of Indiana and Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, and Kentucky, Tennessee. They really need the moisture. And then don't forget, parts of Nebraska, Western Iowa, Southern Minnesota, very dry throughout the month of June, need more storms, and they're going to get them. The storms are well forecast in that area. Just don't ask me to predict exactly how much you're going to get. It's impossible because of the nature of thunderstorms. You know how they work. They can deliver 2 to 3 inches of rain in a half hour, or give you a quarter of an inch in as little as 5 minutes. So it's a pretty tough way to forecast the weather with these big ridge riding storms, but they're there, and that's what's got me a bit excited about this upcoming pattern.
Well, and you talk about these ridge riders, and you alluded to it as well. Sometimes they could be those real small thunderstorms that maybe drop an inch of rain over a square mile area, and then the neighbor to the east or something doesn't see nothing but maybe a sprinkle. So it really does set us up for an interesting pattern when you talk about these ridge riders, Eric.
It does, and so we want to know how long is it going to last. And so as I look out there, I think we're going to have a week, maybe 8 or 9 days of better chances of storms. But then as the heat all returns west, and I'll be honest, we haven't seen sustained heat in the west in a long time. But as they start to take on some heat, California over the weekend saw highs in the 70s. How often do you say that in early July in California? Well, that's all going to change. And we're going to get a deeper trough over, like I said, Great Lakes to Hudson Bay. Problem is the depth of that trough brings in drier air, albeit cooler, which means we buy time likely through the middle of the month with wet weather now, cooler weather later for the Corn Belt. And then the question is, does that last to the rest of July? The big area I'm most worried about is Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, pockets of the Mid-South that stay too close to the ridge to really get the benefit of the storms. So there's some places that see the negative impact of that pattern shift, but a lot of folks end up getting more of a positive look out of it in terms of crop production and growth than anything else.
Well, I know with the ridge riders, we've seen a few of those storms here this past weekend, as you've alluded to, and the folks are definitely checking their rain gauges here on this Tuesday. Eric, what else are you watching on the weather front here globally or across the U.S. here this week?
Yeah, I think I'm still going to give a lot of my attention to the La Nina. It's still quite strong. The trade winds are strong. And so I just can't say yet that the end of July or August, which are critical time periods for the crop, couldn't still see drought stress throughout the plains, western corn belt, maybe getting as far east as Illinois and Indiana. I just can't take that off the table yet because La Ninas in summer can really quickly rebuild central United States ridges. That's what they're known for doing. So we buy time now with better rains, but I haven't yet made the call like, oh, no, we're past it. We're going to avoid major stress. Still sitting on the table there.
Eric, any other final thoughts you have for us here on this Tuesday?
You know, I do want to keep an eye on two other global regions. We do have some heat moving through Ukraine right now, and that part of kind of the Russian wheat belt and the big ag belt over there and parts of Eastern Europe, and it's drier in pockets. But China's a wild card. The Yangtze River Basin's very dry, but I've seen better rains in the Manchurian Plain and also in the North China Plain where they grow a lot of corn and beans. So as we watch the Indian monsoon advance and as we watch the precipitation patterns fluctuate throughout China, we need to keep an eye on any global story that could emerge that could also affect that global balance sheet.
Well, with that, we appreciate the time. As always, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrien. Thanks for the weather updates, sir, and we will talk to you next week.
All right, thanks.